Hello and welcome to this week's Shoot the Moon podcast, broadcasting live and direct from Revenue Rocket World Headquarters in Bloomington, Minnesota. As you know, if you tune in regularly, or maybe even if you don't tune in regularly, Revenue Rocket is the world's premier M&A and growth strategy advisory firm for IT services companies. With me today is my partner, Matt Lockhart. Welcome, Matt. What are we talking about today?
Well, and welcome back, Mike. We've done a couple of these when you were touring around the world here in the past couple of weeks. So it's great to have you back. But we are missing the third leg on our typical stool here. Our partner, Ryan Barnett, is right about now probably in a couple of feet of powder out in Colorado doing some spring skiing. So we'll welcome him back next week. But we'll make do here today, Mike. And you know what we're talking about, it's a super important topic for business owners who are thinking about and contemplating or in the process of selling their business. And the topic is, when do you tell your employees that you are selling the business? And I don't think that there's just one standard answer here. There's a number of factors that need to be considered. But, you know, Mike, why don't you get us going and just sort of set the stage for us as to, you know, what are some of the things that we've got to think about in preparation for communicating that the business is going to be sold?
Yeah, for sure, Matt. You know, I think as a business owner, especially if you've had a solid team and great team that's helped you build a quality business, you want to keep them as looped into any conversations or process that you're having about, you know, the future of the business. Give them much detail as you can, as soon as you can. And that's sort of a natural desire and tendency, especially if you've been working with these people for a while. The challenge with that is that, you know, getting M&A deals done is hard. And you really want to make sure that you're looping in your team on a need-to-know basis at a time that's appropriate. And I can tell you that, you know, if you do that too soon, you run the risk of, you know, maybe even losing some of those long-term employees and or, you know, putting them in a position to be stressful or stressing out about things that, you know, maybe they don't need to worry about. So, you know, on this podcast, we want to unpack that a little bit in a little more detail and talk about, you know, when and who and how soon and all that.
Yeah, I think that's great, Mike. I mean, I think that there's if there's going to be communication prior to the transaction, the sale being completed, thinking about, you know, the who in that and the how and the why, right? And if after the agreement is completed and the deal has been closed upon, you know, how do you manage that communication? So in the context that it does make sense to, you know, start to bring people under the tent, right? And, you know, that's the analogy we use. If you're in the tent and that a process is in play, who and why, you know, who would be brought into the tent, and why would you be bringing, you know, certain key individuals into the know that you are intending to sell the business?
Well, I think, first of all, you know, many of you run these businesses as a partnership or, you know, with other equity holders or at least minimum key stakeholders. And it's important to have the buy-in of those key stakeholders early, even just around the concept of, hey, you're thinking about doing something. I think, you know, call it your board or your executive team, your key leaders in the business probably need to know you're thinking about doing this and be bought into the process, right? And usually they have a key financial and strategic interest in that occurring. So, that's a fairly easy hurdle to jump over, right? I mean, if there are equity owners or key stakeholders that get a piece of a transaction, certainly you're going to want to get their input, talk to them about timing. They're a key partner. I call them a partner level individual. And they'll be able to support that journey because, to get through a process and be able to get through diligence, you're going to need to likely have key members of your team in the know confidentially. Sometimes our clients have those partners sign NDAs to, further fortify their desire to legally to keep things confidential and, not to leak it to the team. But I think that's something that, you want to have buy-in with, particularly key finance leadership. But I think more broadly, what's important to know is that, we generally advise our clients to not advise the rest of their team until the deal is fully negotiated. Now, it might not be closed, but if there's nothing left to negotiate, and let's say you're within a week before close or so, maybe 2 weeks, you want to have an all hands internal meeting in support of maybe a meeting you're going to have with your buyer to announce a deal. It's appropriate to let people know. It's appropriate to manage the communication so they know what's in it for them, why you made this decision, why it's important consideration for them as staff and your clients as well, and have a communication plan sort of fully baked ahead of time for how and who you're going to tell inside the business and when. And likewise, how you're going to communicate with your clients. It's also an important consideration.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we can dig into a couple of those considerations as we go along. And, one thing is we often talk about selling in or selling out, right? As an owner, if you're selling in, you're going to be sticking around, right? You're going to have a role, you're going to be engaged. Your team members who have been working with you are going to continue to see you in some capacity, versus selling out, where after a short transition, you as the leader, as the owner of the business, is going to be walking away. And I think that has an impact too in those considerations. Clearly, if you are going to be selling out and walking away, that can create at least the impression of more change, a different leader altogether, right? And so I think that can play into that consideration as well. You raised up that the potential for employees having concerns, right? When they hear the news, which, to your wise advice, that's why you don't let them in too early, right? What are some of the things that employees typically are concerned about when they hear that there could be a sale of the business and a new ownership group, or they may be joining a bigger business, and so on and so forth? What are some of the sort of key concerns that employees have?
Well, they certainly wonder, what's in it for them, both good and bad, right? Is it going to impact their compensation? Will their charter change inside the business? What sort of new requirements may be thrust upon them in the role, either in the same role or an expanded role? Does this buyer have a different sort of customer and employee care philosophy than what they've been working within up to this point? And what does that mean for them? I think it's important to understand that in our industry, employees have a lot of choices, right? And especially in, North America, we have pretty darn low unemployment. And in some areas of tech and tech consulting and tech services, there's negative unemployment. So, there are choices. And so I think it's critical to kind of walk them out of the shoes of your employees when you're talking to them about, hey, this is what this means for you, right? No, oftentimes, if you're being acquired by a larger company, or let's say you're being sponsored by a sponsored company that has, a financial sponsor, those acquisitions mean there's new and, kind of interesting opportunities that will be presented for those employees. They may not think about that. I think, a lot of people race to, well, what could impact them negatively, but may not focus on everything that could happen positively. And certainly, I think, you've been getting to know your buyer, working closely with them for some period of time as you work through diligence, and, have probably a high degree of confidence that their customer care and employee care philosophy is at a minimum aligned, and certainly could enhance your own approach up to that point. So it's about, communication at that juncture, like, having a open dialogue about, what this means, what you see, why you think it's a good thing. What's kind of in it for those folks. You kind of got to paint that picture, because I think in the absence of those facts and that conversation, people kind of make up their own reality, right? And they might network and hear things on the street about certain buyers, or things that may have happened that may or may not be factual, frankly. And they'll kind of make up their own reality. And sometimes that it has nothing to do with what, has likely been planned for integration or for the future. So I think, being proactive and timing those communications right, and help alleviating concerns or fears by those employees about what will occur will be critically important. In our business, it's a people business, right? You can't, you got to understand, our product walks out the door every day. I know that as an owner and an operator, but, at the end of the day, for a deal to really have meaningful value to a suitor, you have to be able to, those folks have to really come along.
Yeah, and I think that you nailed it, Mike. I mean, for employees, I think first and foremost, right, is job security, right? Do I have a job, right? And thinking back to the timing of of communication, in an asset-based, purchase agreement, all those employees are going to need to be rehired, right? And so, managing that communication appropriately is absolutely key. And then, to your point, benefits and compensation, what does that look like? What is the upside opportunities for those, those things? The culture, right, and values of the organization that they're going to be joining with. How does that change? And then again, to your point, how do you not just alleviate concerns, but create a positive environment, right? That people can see the benefit, right? And the opportunity to grow and do more, as well as obviously potential compensation benefits. I think that it all, Mike, it sort of it all boils down to, thinking about this in the context of an overall communication plan, right? Related to the sale. And, sometimes we see that sellers just think, well, that's going to be the job of the acquiring company, of the company that's buying us, but it's really not, right? I mean, the sellers have a role in thinking about that communication plan and helping prepare, the key messages.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there's a right way and a wrong way to do that. And I think, certainly as you're contemplating it, I would get input from your advisors, your M&A advisors, your legal, kind of how you're assembling your post-merger integration plan, working with your buyer to make sure there's alignment all the way around the communication plan, and putting enough time into that in the messaging and the forum and the timing so that you can minimize any disruption. And I think, making time to talk to people, your employees individually that have concerns. Oftentimes those concerns are can be alleviated just if you understand their perspective, right? Everyone has a different perspective, and frankly, when you make an announcement like this, which is a big announcement, they hear different things based on their perspective of their role and their time with the firm, and what they hope to be happening in the future. And it's really, really important that you take the time to not only get that communication and what the plan is clearly communicated, but then to talk to people about what's keeping them up at night about this deal, and why they might have concerns that could be reasonable and founded in fact, and kind of talk through that so that you can begin to help them understand that what the current reality is, and not if they've made up their mind or made up a fact about a reality because they heard from someone or a friend who went through a similar situation, maybe didn't have or maybe had a wildly positive outcome or a wildly negative outcome, and that's formed their thinking. So I think this old adage, you walk a mile in the other person's shoes, I think is super important in this communication plan, and then being available to field individual concerns, because everyone is on a little bit of a different journey, right? With your company and the time and role and experience that they might have. And I think as an owner who's going to help to facilitate a transition, even if you're selling in, you really have to be sensitive to what people are saying and be listening, so that you can help them through.
Yeah, I think that's great, Mike. And so one of the things to highlight is while the communication plan, may start before a sale with key employees, and then, very shortly before the close of a sale, more people and or the entire team might be brought in, or they may be communicated to right after the sale. And, they're talking about the reasons for the sale, the impact to employees, positive impact, and et cetera, et cetera. And then talking about the future opportunity for people. Well, oftentimes people will make a mistake to think that they can just say it once, right? And that's not the case. So thinking about that follow-up communication strategy is as critical as some of the initial communications that you're going to have about the sale and about the next chapter. So I think that's great. Well, that's about it. So kind of in summary, right? Is start to think as the owner of the business, and or if you're a partnership, who all may be brought into the tent earlier rather than later to assist and help, and or if they've got sort of a stake and they're going to be critical to the deal getting done, as well as the early success of the business. Also, very important to manage that communication very tightly and very confidentially, because you don't want the greater organization to know outside of your plan and your communication plan. To, as you say, really put yourselves in the shoes of your team members, to think about what their concerns could be and have the appropriate messaging and answers in place, as well as follow-up communication and individual communication channels for people to, express their concerns and or just talk about the situations. That you've got to have good follow-up communication on an ongoing basis as part of your communication plan, and that both the buyers and the sellers are participating in the communication to alleviate concerns and to get people fired up, right? About the opportunity. The 1 + 1 = 4, 5, or 6, right? Opportunity in bringing two firms together. So I think that's kind of the keys there. It's super important. It's often overlooked which is we've had the opportunity to help a couple of people sell their businesses here recently in the past, couple of weeks. And so it was on our mind because we helped them through this and recognized just how important it was. Mike, what did I miss, or what do you think?
I think you got it all, Matt. I think it's critical. Just the takeaway is communication is critical, timing is critical. Get input on that, formulate a strong plan, and move forward with your deal. So with that, we'll tie a ribbon on it for this week's Shoot the Moon podcast. Hope you can tune in next week. We're back with lively topics around M&A and growing your business in the IT services world. With that, make it a great week. Take care.